Congratulations everyone, we've got another new children's minister. Okay, celebration's over. We have got a new Prime Minister and with it, a new children's minister. Nadine Zahawi is out of here and we have a new children's minister looking after the early years and she is called Kemi Badenoch. We don't know that much about her right now. She's only been a minister since 2017, but she's supposedly a bit of an up-and-coming figure in the Conservative Party. She currently has a child at nursery, and she said so far that she looks forward to listening to experts and people working on the front line to give children a firm foundation for the future. Certainly sounds like good talk. Of course, we've heard that all before, and she comes in with a tricky brief, whether it's 30 hours, send funding, the recruitment crisis. There's lots of problems in early years right now and she's going to have a lot that she needs to fix. Along with her came also a new education secretary. Damien Hines is also out and we now have former Chief Whip and Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson in the post. Second big story of the week is that the advisory panel who are going to be looking over the reform of the EYFS and the Development Matters document has been announced. Now it's going to be led by the well-known early years expert and head teacher, Dr. Julian Grenier, and he's going to be leading a full panel of around, I think it's around 10 names, including Jill Jones from Ofsted, Jan Dubiel is in there, Iram Sarij. There's a number of quite well-known figures in there. The biggest concern that a lot of people are having with it is that there's not very many people representing the PVI sector. In fact, the only person who could conceivably be said to be representing the PVI sector is Beatrice Merrick from Early Education. That's combined with the fact that we have a number of people from head teachers associations, there's a number of people representing primary schools, and in general just a bit of concern that the early years at its core is not going to be properly represented. They are going to be talking to PACEY, to NDNA, to the Early Years Alliance. So I think there's going to be definitely some input from beyond the panel, but definitely a story to keep your eyes on. Story number 3, and this month we've had a report from the group of MPs that looks after social integration. And they're talking again about intergenerational care, encouraging nurseries and care homes to co-locate or try and encourage better relationships between nurseries and care homes. It's good timing for this because it comes hot on the heels of our own interview with early years expert Alistair Bryce Clegg, who of course was on the Channel 4 show Old People's Home for 4-year-olds. We talked about everything from intergenerational care through continuous provision, small world play, and even his thoughts on plastic versus wooden resources. It's about a 13-minute long interview, but there's clips throughout the article that you'll find linked in the article below. So go and check it out and let us know what you think. Story number 4, and this month a report has come out that's shown that in London alone there is now 185 million funding shortfall. The report's charting the problem as a steep rise in demand while budgets are flatlining. Feels like the same story we're seeing everywhere at the moment. We've also, in slightly better news, seen that Westminster City Council have opened a new flagship centre for disabled children in the area. It will open 7 days a week, features a sensory room, soft play area, and even a dedicated office for parents and carers. This is the part where we normally talk about a few interesting studies about child development that we've read this month. And the first one we've got up is out of the US. Now they're talking about preschool teachers and whether maybe they're asking too many simple questions to the kids they're looking after. Of course, it's not necessarily going to pass exactly to the UK, but I do think it was an interesting read in terms of looking into whether children can benefit from, teachers asking more challenging questions. Next up, we had an interesting study that compared a group of toddlers who were spending time with peers and those that were spending time with adults and how they process language. And it turns out that they do a lot better when they're spending time with their peers. It showed that afterwards they tested them on the skill of associating a new word to a new object. And it turns out that the children who were spending time with their peers did this a lot better than the ones who were spending time with adults. The third study that we mentioned this week is all about snacks, one of my favorite things personally. But it was just, I guess, quite a simple thought, but the idea that actually more variety and higher quantities of snacks is what encourages children to eat more. So if you're looking to cut down on the amount that children are eating, a lot of people talk about putting stuff on smaller plates, and I think this study showed that that's not what's important. It's just about how much food is on the table. And finally, we had an interesting study about preschoolers with ADHD and how likely they are to be ready for school. An interesting insight just into whether you are kind of dealing with these kind of problems when it comes to primary transition. Story number 6 this week is pulling together a few loose ends about the early years workforce. Now, I think it's fair to say that we've definitely got some problems facing the early years workforce at the moment. The Early Years Alliance have warned that early years staff are being vastly underpaid compared to other sectors, which we know from the reports that we read last month. Ofsted have also released new research showing that teachers in general are feeling overworked and undervalued by parents and leaders. I think that's probably something that we can all relate to. And so I think the key here is that it's time to have your say, really, and it's good timing because Nursery World are currently surveying the sector. Check out the link below, and it's all about workforce finances to kind of produce some figures that might actually make a change in terms of policy. Next up is the news that Ofsted are looking to increase their registration fees. Now, the ideas are currently out for consultation, but their proposal is that both application and annual fees would increase from £220 to £269 for nurseries and from £35 to £43 for childminders. Doesn't seem like a huge amount, but I think the problem is that this is coming off the back of all the problems we're having with 30 hours funding and other funding issues. It's just a kind of, it seems like a further insult to the sector that's already struggling. Obviously, they're citing increased running costs and inflation for these rises, but the truth is that that same logic is not being applied to the funding that we're seeing elsewhere. There's also a couple of interesting watches and reads down in this section of the video. There was a good piece from a preschool talking about how they're dealing with the new inspection framework, and Ofsted have also released a quite highly controversial video this week about cultural capital. Head over to Twitter. You can see that there's some pretty well-respected names who aren't very happy with the definition they're giving. Story number 8 is the news out of the new report from the Education Policy Institute that is saying that sadly the disadvantage gap in the early years is at a standstill since 2017. The annual State of Education report explains that actually only in primary schools has the gap between more disadvantaged learners and their peers closed over the last year. The executive chairman of the Education Policy Institute, David Laws, has tried to make an appeal to the Prime Minister. He said that we need a renewed policy drive to narrow the disadvantage gap, and it needs to be based on evidence of what actually makes an impact rather than political ideology. That's probably a sentiment that we can all share. At the same time this month, the Education Committee Chair, Robert Halfon, has written to the Education Secretary to explain that he's unconvinced that the opportunity areas are genuinely helping to improve social mobility through education. Thought this was a really interesting read. He wasn't necessarily attacking the idea of social mobility altogether, but just whether the kind of administration fees and other things that we're seeing have actually helped the opportunity areas or whether they're just going to somewhere in middle management. The business news this month, there's been a few interesting acquisitions. Proud family customers and award-winning group N Family Club have announced 2 new settings and in fact have plans to open up 5 more in the coming year, so watch that space. Saris Nurseries have acquired their 10th setting in West Sussex. Kids Planet continue their massive growth at the moment by acquiring 3-setting Rainbow Day nurseries, while Poppy and Jax have acquired their 9th. And finally, new kid on the block, Toddletown Nursery Group, have added their 4th setting. Finishing off the stories this week, we have the sad news that Vivian Gus, the author, teacher and pioneer of the helicopter stories approach, has died at the age of 90. If you want to hear more about the wonderful work that she did for the early years community, I highly recommend the touching blog post that we have in the article, where you can read more about helicopter stories and what she brought to early years. We found a great community this month on Facebook called SNAP, that's Sustainable Nurseries Against Plastic. We're really passionate about trying to help nurseries to be more sustainable at family, and we thought this was a really great support group. Pacey have released a number of free online resources for childminders, specifically for 2-year-olds. Check those out. There was a great article in the TES about early years maths and teaching maths in the EYFS. And the Nursery World Awards shortlist has been revealed. Worth going and having a look at and seeing if you know any friendly names on there. That's it for this month. We'll be back next month with more early years news where, who knows, maybe we'll have another children's minister. I'll keep the champagne on ice. If you want to keep updated in the meantime, follow us on social media, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow our blog on family.co.uk/blog, where we post weekly stories from famous faces. And as ever, if you have any feedback or want to see more of anything in these monthly briefings, send me a message on ma@family.co.uk. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I couldn't do that because I did this with a massive smile on my face.
The glass didn't go.